worked. Does the audio work? Can everyone hear me? No? Does it work now? Yes? Okay, nice. Cool. Hello, everyone. Very cool to be here. India was always on my bucket list of places to go to, and it's cool that I'm now here. I will do more exploring today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow as well, so that's very nice. My name is Ives van Hoorne, and my name is very hard to pronounce, also in the Netherlands. Yesterday I even heard from someone that it was the hardest to pronounce name she's ever heard, so now I have that achievement as well. But because my name is hard to pronounce, you can also say Ives, you can say Ives. My friends have more trouble than others with my name, so they call me Flip. If you want to call me Flip, that's fine as well. Hey, hello. I am the co-founder nowadays of CodeSandbox, and that's also what I want to talk about. So, first I want to ask, who of you have heard of CodeSandbox before? Nice, that is good. I am still going to give the introduction of CodeSandbox because I like that. So this is CodeSandbox. It has these boxes. I always keep showing this because I worked very long on this. Okay. The next part, this actually is CodeSandbox. Is everything viewable? CodeSandbox is like your local editor, except for that it has this code editor here and this preview. So, for example, I can make changes here. I can do hello, React, India, and it updates here. The cool thing is, and the best thing I think about CodeSandbox is that if you save, then you get a new URL and you can share this with someone else, and then they can work on it, they can give feedback, and they can literally do anything with it as long as they fork. That's a requirement, the forking part. Okay. Oh, this is the wrong one. So today I want to talk about what I learned from building CodeSandbox and how CodeSandbox came from like concept to where it is now, and how parts of CodeSandbox work. Specifically how the bundler, the preview works, and how VS Code implementation inside CodeSandbox works. So let's get started. 3 years back. Right, 3 years ago I was working for a company and I went to my first conference ever. It was React Europe, and I was very inspired by the whole ambience there. It was amazing. There were all people sharing what they've built, and there were talks about some new technologies. I was very impressed. Also, Sunil Pai, the first talker today, was there as well. He was specifically impressing me because he was talking about compile time optimization, and it was so cool to see. And after the conference, I thought, well, I want to also build something and contribute to the community. So I started to write down every idea that I've got. Every time I got a problem, I would write it down, put it on my noteboard, and then I would just do not anything. I wouldn't do anything with it, but it was nice that I had lots of ideas on my noteboard. So I didn't do anything with it. I went on vacation to St. Ives, and that's where I got the latest idea. So I was working for a company at that time. We were just getting started with React, and I got questions from my coworkers about React specifically, or how React works in combination with Redux. I didn't have my laptop with me, so they sent me code snippets on Slack, and I had to think what the problem was. I didn't have a preview, I didn't have syntax highlighting at the time. So that's when the idea came that it would be super cool if people could take code from their local editor, put it in an online editor, and then share a URL so that I can take a look. Even better if I can fork it and then make changes myself. So the idea came down to, what if I put my local editor on the web? So, like all my nodes, I put it right in the top here. There. Very nice. And I didn't do anything with it. I started going to university, and I drank a lot of beer and went to student parties. And for a long time that was nice. Look, that's me with a nice sombrero. And this is Bas. He's here as well. So But at some point I started to feel a bit unproductive. So if you look at my contribution graph, I started going to university here and I didn't do that many commits. I was just going to parties, and at some point I started to feel unproductive, and I thought, okay, I need to start a project, a side project, to feel a bit more useful to myself. So I took the first item from the list, and that was a browser, React, editor, playground that allows you to create components instantly. Sounds very fake, but that was okay. It was supposed to be fake. So I started going to the drawing board, and during my lectures I started to play with the idea. So this was the first thing that came to mind, having a design in Sketch. And it was very simple. You had code on the left, preview on the right, and you were supposed to only edit a single component. So this would be the button component, and you would have multiple components here. So in reality, it was kind of like a component editor. And the name was even React Sandbox at the time. So then came the implementation, the very basic implementation. I was very happy with this already. I remember this moment. I was super proud that when you change code, it would update automatically here. That was super cool already. I even had this fancy error thing. Found it very cool too. Next step, it was with tabs. So you would be able to import from other tabs. It had this weird resolving system, but it worked. So you were able to create multiple components and import them. Okay, and now we're going to how it actually works, because the implementation is simpler than it looks. What happens here is that we actually have two applications in CodeSandbox. We have the editor, that's this part, and we have the preview, which is a separate application in an iframe. Whenever I change code here, I would, for example, do bop, bop, bop. It would update the preview with the code. So, for example, what happens here is that all the files would be sent to the preview. It will go through the transpilers, so it becomes digestible by the browser, and then it would go through evaluation. I also made a sandbox to show how it works. So what happens here, this is the sandbox, and you can see here the files, so index.ts, greet.ts, and you can see the transpiled code as well. And everything comes down to this. Can everyone read it? Can everyone also hear me? I hear myself sometimes. And okay, all fine then. And everything comes down to this, the run code function. It gets all the files, which is an object. The key is the file name, and then the value is the code. And it gets the path to run. So the first thing that it does is it gets the code, and it transforms the code then to digestible output. So for this file, this is the source code, and this is the transpiled code. If I would make changes here, you can see that the transpiled code updates. That's here. And then we evaluate the code with eval. The fun thing is that it even says here that eval can be harmful. You should never use eval. Well, CodeSandbox is built on top of eval. We've built a startup on top of eval. I'm very proud with this. I'm not sure if I should be proud though, but that's for another conversation. The interesting thing is that if you do, for example, an import here, it gets transpiled to a require function. And a require is just a function that you can override. It tries to import greet from greet.ts here, which is this file, but I'll get to that later. If you evaluate this code using eval, it takes these variables and puts them on the context as well as closures. So this require would actually call this function. Even if my ESLint would say require is declared, but its value is never read, it's actually used in the eval function. So whenever this function require greet.ts is called, we go into this function, we get the new path, and we call its own function again with the files and the path. And it goes through the same flow again. So now for greet.ts, it reads the code, it transforms the code, and it evaluates. But in greet.ts, it sets an exports. So it does exports.greet is greet, which means that you have object which has greet, and that's returned. So what happens here, this exports object gets set to greet, and we return module.exports, which contains the exports object. So in the end, greet.ts returns an object with function greet. And here, that's then what used. Greet.greet, hello, and then the word. So if you call run, it actually does work with multiple files. Even if I would change this to alert message plus potato, and I would go to here and do run, it works here as well. It's put after. So this is how the bundler of CodeSandbox, what it comes down to, how it works. And we've been running on this bundler for very long. We've been making changes to it, but this is the gist of it. So I continued working on making CodeSandbox more useful. The crazy idea that I had here is that you can have multiple projects and that you can import projects in other projects. That would be a crazy idea, kind of like NPM libraries. So if I would have a sandbox and I wanted to use that sandbox in my other sandbox, I would be able to import it. But then it turned out that this looks very much like a file explorer. And I was afraid that people would get confused, so I turned it into a file explorer. and now it has directories. So the idea of importing libraries and libraries was not there anymore. It's still a very cool idea to import sandbox in sandbox. It's still something to explore. But this is starting to shape up already. At this moment, I got NPM dependencies to work. So this is Material UI working in CodeSandbox. That was also a big highlight. I didn't think it would be possible at first. And this cat is very popular in the Netherlands. It's a cat that always craves for attention, and it says aandacht in that tone. So that's why it's used for the obvious example here. And you can see that the idea changed over time. So initially it was a component editor. Then it was a component library builder. Then it was an online component library builder where you can use other people's sandboxes and import them in your own sandbox. And in the end it was so advanced, the name was just too long. It became an online React editor. And what I learned from this is that you should let the idea evolve. Even if you have an imperfect idea, just start working on it, because the idea will get better over time. Because you work on it, you will get more ideas during working on it. You will refine the idea, and you will probably pivot 20 times, and then you have an idea that fits you. So just start working on a project, even if you think that the idea is imperfect. So on the 26th of January, we had this beautiful editor. It almost is the final editor. But then I lost motivation. So at this point, Bas, my design friend since we were 12, joined as well with CodeSandbox. He's sitting there. But yeah, we stopped working on it for 3 months. That was in January that I lost motivation. And you can see that in the contribution graph. It's very seeable that it was okay, and then no, no, no. And the problem was that because I was looking at CodeSandbox every day, it started to feel very not special to me. Initially I had a lot of fun and I thought it would be very cool, but then at some point I saw it every day and I thought, okay, this is normal and I might be the only one that uses this. So I started going back to lectures, didn't do anything with the project, and then my friends asked me, hey, you've been gone from the lectures for so long, what's up? So I told them that I was working on this project, CodeSandbox, and I showed them it, and they became much more enthusiastic than I expected. They were so enthusiastic that they made me enthusiastic as well again. And I thought, oh, maybe other people do find it interesting. So I said to myself that we are going to release CodeSandbox on the 1st of April. Bad date. So the idea was to try to finish every feature that we have outstanding. If we don't get it finished on 1st of April, that feature is dropped. So just get something out of the door on 1st of April. And that's what happened, because you can see in my graph that it went suddenly very, well, up. There was a lot of development over time. And I learned from this that you should seek external feedback. It can go both ways. You can get a lot of negative feedback. That can be motivating as well. You can get positive feedback, also motivating. It's just that you need to get external opinions. Something tied to it is that you should release fast. If you release soon, then you get a better view of how it's actually used. For example, I never knew that library maintainers would use CodeSandbox for demoing their libraries. I mean, now it's obvious that people do it that way, but I never thought of it as a use case when I was working on CodeSandbox until we've actually released it. So that was very interesting insight that we only found out by releasing. The second thing I learned, oh no, the fourth thing I learned is that we should follow KISS. Keep it simple or stupid, or you can also see it as keep it simple, stupid. And that means don't try to over-engineer every feature. Keep it as simple as possible so that you can get something out of the door. That's the only way that we were able to get CodeSandbox out of the door. If we would have thought a lot about file system management and how people were going to use it in different ways before we actually released something, then we would have never released it. Right now, we released with saving all the files in a Postgres database, and that worked out fine for us for a long time. The second one, don't over-engineer. It's the same message. I really want to drive down the point that you shouldn't start designing your applications of how it may be used instead of how it can be used currently. You should build your applications based on current requirements instead of future requirements. Another example is that our server was a $40 a month VPS for the first 1.5 years for CodeSandbox. Even when we had 1 million sandboxes, we still were running everything on $40 a month. That was just because we just didn't think of getting Kubernetes up for the first release because we would never have built release CodeSandbox that way. So then on the 3rd of April, we actually released it on Twitter. Not on the 1st of April. That was not a good idea. That would be a good release. The thing is, I tweeted it. I was super nervous. It was a big release for me. And I got 6 whopping likes. Yay! The breakthrough release. And the fun thing is, those likes were from all my high school friends. I had 60 followers at the time, and they liked it just because it looked nice, but they didn't know what it was. So that was a bummer. Next try, releasing it on Reddit. We got more response there, so we got a very big spike of views, and we got a lot of positive feedback. It was good for motivation, but then it went down again, and we got on low users. The next thing that I did was I started emailing people. So I started emailing people using CodeSandbox, asking what they wanted to see more, what they wanted to see as improvements, and that really worked. For example, I also emailed Ken C. Dodds in what he wanted to see in CodeSandbox. I implemented everything he wanted in a day, and he started using CodeSandbox for all his examples, and suddenly more people started to see CodeSandbox. So having extensive collaboration with people using your product is really helpful for making it better and also for getting the word out. And it started to pick up pace. So I remember this. This was one of the highlights of my life. Dan Abramov still is a big hero of me, and he just started tweeting out of the blue, wow, CodeSandbox.io is cool, let's do it NPM dependencies. I was so enthusiastic about this that I made a Snapchat of this, of my screen, and I put, "Dit is so cool." So in translation, this means "this is so cool" from Dutch to English. And I was just, this was crazy to me. Really, really cool. Then later we got feedback saying, "Marry me, I'm in love with you, this is delicious, thank you, I've included you in my will." I still need to find this person. And we even got to Hacker Noon at some point. And this was, you can see based on my Snapchat behavior that I was all very, very enthusiastic. I did not capitalize the S here. That's not how it's supposed to be. Oh well. But I made a scientific graph of showing how my university life was compared to CodeSandbox popularity. It was in direct correlation. As CodeSandbox became more popular, my past exams went down as well. And that was pretty hard. I had to make a choice at some point. And I decided to pause my studies at the time. I had 7 years to go back and retain my credits. That was a nice, safe way for me to go. So yeah, I paused my studies and went full-time on CodeSandbox at that point. In the meantime, we got a lot of feedback from people. We became open source. We didn't start as an open source project, but we became open source a month or two after. And we decided to set some values, because for every feature request, we needed to see whether it was actually a good feature request. So based on how CodeSandbox was used and what we value, we created 3 values. The first one is that we want to lower the learning curve. Lots of people use CodeSandbox to learn web development or React development or Angular Vue. Doesn't matter what kind of development, because they don't need to set up an environment. If you want to learn web development, you should go right to the code, because that's in the end what you work with the most. I'm personally also someone who likes to learn by doing. So having a platform that you can just go to the URL, start making changes to code and see it happen, that is extremely valuable. And CodeSandbox should be one of those platforms that people can go to. The second one is that we want to encourage sharing and discovery. So sharing is already pretty obvious. You can share the URL with someone else and they can look at it. Discovery is really interesting, because every created sandbox is kind of like a small piece of information. And we now almost have 3 million sandboxes on CodeSandbox. It would be super cool if you can just index all those sandboxes and find examples. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to try to use the internet. This was not in my... We have this search. Yes, ooh, it works. We have this search. And for example, if you want to have an example with Redux, if you want to see how Redux is used in different examples, you can filter on Sandbox with the dependency Redux. And you can see all these different examples. Or if you want to find it in combination with Redux Thunk, then you can get all these examples as well. And that is very useful for finding new information. The last one is give a local editor experience, trademark. The first reason for this is that we want to make it easy for people to switch between their local and online editor. They should be able to use the same key bindings, the same environment. The second reason is that if people learn to do web development in their online environment, then once they go local, or if they go local, they should not have to learn a new environment again. Those are our 3 values. Now I want to go deeply into how one of these values is really integrated in CodeSandbox. That's the last one. Because next. Okay. Not too long ago we got PSCode support. And I want to tell the story about how PSCode was integrated in CodeSandbox. And it started with themes. So with CodeSandbox, when... So Sarah Fiera and I were going to a workshop of Sarah Drasner, and she was using Night Owl. Night Owl is a Fiesta theme. And we were thinking that it would be super cool if you would be able to use that theme in CodeSandbox as well. So we started to look, how can we make Fiesta themes work in CodeSandbox? Well, it turns out that Fiesta themes are actually pretty simple. They are a JSON file, and they define for every element what color it should be. So for example, if you have button.background is this color, button.hover background is this color. In our case, we are still using React for the editor, and we were using styled components for styles. So we just literally put this whole JSON file in our context of styled components, and we started using it by default for most of the elements. So we would say props.theme, activity bar.inactive foreground, and then have a default for in the case no one has a Fiesta theme set. And this worked out well, but there was one problem, which was code syntax highlighting. Who knows this icon? Wow, nice. That's good. This is the icon of TextMate. TextMate is an editor, a code editor, that has been super popular for web developers. And it introduced a lot of standards that are still used in the popular editors these days. One of those is TM language. TM language is a file type that allows the editor to convert code to tokens. And it can colorize the tokens. So for example, if you have code saying let A is 5, TM language would say that 5 is a numeric, let is a keyword, A is a variable declaration, those kind of tokens. And then in VS Code it would say, oh, a numeric is blue, and down it goes. The thing is that TM language defines this whole format in reg expressions, which are only parsable by a library called Oniguruma. And Oniguruma is a a C library. It's written in C, and it's only available in C. So this wouldn't work in the browser until a couple years ago, because we got WebAssembly. So recently it's started to become possible to have fast syntax highlighting of TM language in the browser, because we were able, well, Nick Sandu was able to convert oniguruma to onigasm. And that is super cool. WebAssembly has a big future, I think, in the web application development space, in web applications. And I think if you should pick a language to learn, Rust would be a super good option. Yeah, that would be very cool. And then talk to us. Okay. Then when we released it, oh no, I want to show this. Look, if I do this, look, and then go through them, look, it's like your local editor. It even has lights ones. It will go there in one moment. Oh. Yeah, and yeah, so we got Night Owl here. So that worked. That's nice. When we released this, we got a question on Twitter, what about extensions? And it makes sense, this kind of questions, because you think Fiesta Themes, Fiesta extensions. But based on our implementation using context, that was like a long way off. But at the time I was doing an internship, and I thought, oh well, let's try this. So I said, challenge accepted. It's a crazy idea to get Fiesta extensions work in the browser, because this is how it works. VSCode is an editor with a UI, and it executes all its extensions in a separate extension host, in a separate node process. And the node process can also spawn other node processes. This is a very good system, and this is what makes VSCode very fast, because if an extension hangs, the VSCode UI doesn't hang, because it's in a separate node process. If a VSCode extension is slow, then the only thing that you will notice is that auto-completions will take a while to show up. And if an extension just goes berserk, then VSCode can decide to restart the extension host without restarting VSCode. So this is a really good system. The challenge is making this work in CodeSandbox. So the initial idea that I had was spawning the extension host in a web worker, and then having a bridge between the messaging between CodeSandbox and converting the calls of the extension host to something that CodeSandbox understands. Well, this sounds like the cleanest solution. It probably is the cleanest solution, but it was so hard to implement because VSCode has hundreds of APIs. I had to re-implement them all in CodeSandbox. And doing this in my free time during an internship just didn't cut it. So I started to think a bit deeper on this, and I thought, if VSCode already has all the APIs, why don't we implement VSCode in CodeSandbox? I wish I had this meme. Do you know this meme? Okay, that was my slide for the meme. So that was the next idea, implementing VSCode inside CodeSandbox. Crazy enough, this worked, but not without its hitches. So the first try is, I looked at VSCode as the application itself. VSCode is an Electron application. It has its main process, it has renderer processes. Renderer processes are responsible for rendering the UI. And all the processes have access to native modules like FS, Net, which communicate with the operating system. The first thing that I tried is just stubbing all these native modules and making it work in the browser. Well, it would be very cool if this worked, because then we would be able to run any Electron application in the browser, but it was, again, so much work and probably wouldn't have worked out if I continued trying it. So the second try was looking at the actual VSCode codebase. And it's architected beautifully. Some people have opinions on this, me too. It's very C-sharpy, but it's very cool. So VSCode has a lot of services. It has like hundreds of services. It has a notification service, file service, much more than is here. And they all have their own purpose. So a notification service is responsible for showing notifications. File service is responsible for reading and writing files. The idea is that we can maybe replace some of these services with our own. So I first created, this is an important part. Services can require each other. So an editor service can require a file service. If the editor service needs to write files, it does file service.write file, so that they're all connected. This is very testable too. You can create stub file service, for example, if you want to create unit tests. Well, I created a CodeSandbox service, which was purely responsible for communicating with the CodeSandbox APIs. So then after that, I created a CodeSandbox storage service, CodeSandbox file service, well, every service that is CodeSandbox related. And I replaced these existing services with the CodeSandbox file service, with the CodeSandbox storage service, and they were connected to the CodeSandbox service. And actually, that worked. It was actually super cool because as I added more services, more parts of the UI started to work. So it was kind of like an RPG where if I got the storage service to work, it was like, wow, you now unlock the quick picker and you unlock the menu bar. And it worked immediately, like FSCode. It was so much fun. Lots of late nights just trying to get everything to work. There were some requirements to make this a bit sustainable. I shouldn't change code, because that will generate merge conflicts in the future, so only add code. I should expose FSCode as an API so that contributors don't have to go in the FSCode codebase to add stuff to the FSCode from CodeSandbox. And keep it fast and small, because in the end it's in the browser, so we need to do a lot of tree shaking and minifying. But the advantages are so cool. It's updatable, so if FSCode gets an update, theoretically, a day later we can come with the same changelog just hosted on our page and say, look, we've also done this update. But yeah, that's theoretically. Until now it's happened one time because I just need to put time into updating. We're not reinventing the wheel. I found out about a lot of new things in FSCode by implementing it in CodeSandbox. That's really cool. And you're familiar with the existing editor, because you can use the same key bindings. I want to do a quick demo. I know I'm over time, but I like this so much. If I go here, copy my settings here, go here, this looks the same by the way, and I paste my settings from my local editor in here, my editor will become the same as my local editor. So it's just the same. Where was I? Okay. So this is the final scenario of how it worked. There is a whole different talk that I can do on, the time is almost up. Okay, there's a whole different part that I can do on the extension host. That's a web worker. So we re-implemented the Node runtime in a web worker to make the extensions of FSCode work in the browser. I can talk about it after if you want to. That's really fun to talk about. One last post thing. Bas and I decided to raise funds for CodeSandbox and really become a startup when we got more popular and we started to get acquisitions offers, and we decided, well, we're young, we want to start a real company from this. Now we have a team of 10. Sid is here, he's working at CodeSandbox. He gives a talk tomorrow, so also go to Sid's talk. Bas is there, so everyone with a CodeSandbox shirt except me. I should actually also wear a CodeSandbox shirt, talk to them about CodeSandbox. That would be very fun. And now the new thing that I'm learning is, as more people work on CodeSandbox, I get to work less on code. And I need to learn more about these kind of new things that I haven't experienced yet. And this is something that I will make a talk of in the future, but not today. Okay, thanks a lot for listening.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. There is one thing. If you're using CodeSandbox as a library maintainer for bug reports, we are creating a service for library maintainers in CodeSandbox. So if you're a library maintainer and you use CodeSandbox, please talk to us because we need testers. Lastly, I have a couple stickers. So if you want stickers, then talk to me. Okay, that's really it.
Thank you, Ives. Thank you for such an inspirational.
Recording was brought to you by Twilio. We allow you to integrate different means of communication such as video, chat, or SMS into your React applications. If you want to learn how you can send SMS directly from a React chat, check out this video on the right or go to our Twilio YouTube channel. And if you want to watch another React India talk, we picked one out just for you over here on the left. Thanks for watching.